When it comes to IPs, you don't get much more of a slam dunk than the world of Resident Evil, so I could never understand how the hell Constantine Films ended up with this abomination when adapting the rich and terrifying world onto the big screen. For years I blocked out the horrible nightmares of zombie soldiers firing RPGs and riding motorbikes. I suppressed the horrifying lick of CGI, but I finally realised what the fundamental flaw was that doomed the Resident Evil film franchise from the very beginning, and it's perfectly symbolised in this one scene from the first film. In this world they're building, with monsters and ghouls around every corner, the protagonist is cornered by one of the most ferocious creatures in the entire Resident Evil franchise, zombie dogs. For a moment I'm on the edge of my seat wondering how she can possibly escape, 6 dogs staring her down, ready to devour her, and then she goes and does that. It actually made me laugh the first time I watched it, especially how she booted the last dog, because in making her so ridiculously powerful, they literally negated any fear I once felt for the exploration of this horrifying new world. The world of Resident Evil was completely shattered, because in that moment I knew that virtually nothing within it stood any chance against her. No zombie or zombie dog had any chance. She even beats the living shit out of Nemesis. She's basically Keanu Reeves, except she's not in the Matrix. It's almost as if the world of Raccoon City and beyond should be afraid of her, not the other way around. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this was the only problem the Resident Evil films had, but if you create an apocalyptic world infested with flesh-eating zombies and creatures even more chilling like the Lickers, in an attempt to make this world so terrifying you're behind the sofa in anticipation of the horrors that lurk around every corner, making the protagonist superhuman is a pretty brain-dead move in my opinion. We're talking about a protagonist here who develops telekinetic powers. You literally negate the power of the world, and then the film relies so much more heavily on the story and the character development of the people within that world. Which for these films, the less said about that the better, because if you analyse any of the characters, they develop as well as an egg in a boiling saucepan. Literally none of them have any genuine growth throughout the whole story. The closest thing I could see is in the final chapter, where Alice realises she's a clone and confronts the Red Queen with old lady Alice. But then what development does she actually experience? She still goes ahead and beats the shit out of everyone just like she did before. Perhaps at a stretch you could include the relationship she develops with her clone daughter from the Umbrella T-virus simulations. I did get semi-invested into that, but again it didn't really lead anywhere or change Alice herself in any fundamental way. I actually think that even horror films, to be most effective, should focus mainly on the characters within the world and build the world via the characters and their reactions to it, not building the world via throwing scary things at the audience to show them how captivatingly terrifying the world is. But if you're going to opt for scary things, which have been done successfully countless times, maybe don't make the protagonist one of the strongest people on the bloody planet. The pinnacle for me was in Resident Evil Extinction, when she uses her psychic powers to shield Carlos from the stream of fire and then decimate all of the zombie crows around them. There's literally not a single threat they can introduce without Alice stripping all power from it within a couple of seconds. It's not even like Resident Evil was the pioneer of the zombie apocalypse film franchise. They had plenty of material to take inspiration from, like Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Pet Sematary. That's if you ignore the literal source material they had to fall back on. Just look at some of the most effective examples. You have The Last of Us and The Walking Dead, which are series that really focus on the characters within that apocalyptic world and their stories to be successful. Then there's films like Dawn of the Dead and 28 Weeks Later that focus more on how dangerous the world around the characters is and captivates the audience through the potential horrors lurking around every corner. It's also quite telling from these two sets of examples that in the first, the series are more about the characters on a fluid journey. They're very rarely confined to one space for a prolonged period of time in the series. Whereas much of 28 Weeks Later and Dawn of the Dead is set in one particular place, like the Mall or London. In the first case, the series uses the characters within the world to make sense of it, and help the audience navigate it through character-orientated exploration. Whether it's exploring the world through Joel and Ellie's eyes, and sharing their dread of the infected as we watch how terrified they are when they encounter them, all the way to the different philosophies conveyed through the groups that form in The Walking Dead. Like the main crew showing a tendency to show faith in humanity, as they take risks on integrating new people into the group, like Sadiq, who turns out to be a doctor when they need him most. The Saviours, who believe people are resources, or the Whisperers that believe the world belongs to the dead. In the second case, the films show the audience how terrifying and dangerous the world is by having the characters lock themselves away from it, whether it's locking themselves inside the mall in Dawn of the Dead to protect themselves from the swarms of flesh-eating zombies outside, and getting swarmed the moment they do leave, all the way to 28 Weeks Later and how devastating it can be when the zombies do break into the containment zone and completely rip to shreds the safe haven they spent months creating. Resident Evil does neither of these things. The characters are often mobile, and we follow the journey of Alice, yet she barely experiences any character development or growth, and we don't share her dread for the world because she's so overpowered. Even the source material they had all along from the video games shows us how to effectively portray Resident Evil. Think of the moment you entered the mansion, or the first cutscene of the zombie. The Nemesis pursuit in Resident Evil 3. These moments are so gripping and spine-tingling because of the overwhelming sense of dread you get in these flesh-eating monsters chasing you. In how life-threatening their existence in this world is for you. In how difficult it makes it to traverse this new world infested by horrors that could lurk around every corner. Even the slow door opening in the games built suspense because of how terrifying the world was. But in the films this mechanic wouldn't make a difference because whatever is through the door we know would have no chance against Alice. The suspense built by such a world is completely destroyed when you introduce a protagonist that is virtually invincible. Even though her clones might be useless, she's basically Superwoman. Maybe this is just me, and I'm overreacting to this one aspect of Resident Evil that failed it so wildly. Perhaps the poor story or plot was the real nail in the coffin for the films. Or perhaps they weren't even that bad at all, given their commercial success. But I just can't wrap my head around the fact that so many of the characters were adopted straight from the games. You almost have the full gang, from Chris and Claire Redfield, all the way to Leon Kennedy and Ada Wong. So why the hell does the one new character you introduce have to be a protagonist that binds so effectively to the T-virus that she completely overshadows everything else in the world? Which I just find mind-blowingly incompetent. For me, literally just adopting Jill, Chris, Claire or even Leon as a main character would have set this series as a whole up so much more effectively. It really can't be understated how much of a slam dunk the Resident Evil IP is as well. Even back in 2002, when the first film was released, Constantine Films had Resident Evil 1, 2, 3 and Code Veronica to use as inspiration. It's literally so simple to make it work. The entire universe is already built for you by the games, and yet still they found a way to completely butcher it. I know this is way past the point of the first film, but take Resident Evil 4 for example. That game is literally tailor-made for a direct film adaptation. From the compelling plotline to the character development of Leon, Ashley, Ada, Louise, even Jack Krauser. All of these characters either already have great development in the game, like Louise, especially in the remake, or have the capacity for real genuine growth and development. Hell, Resident Evil 7 and 8 have far more compelling stories than I found the Constantine series to be. Given the era of game adaptations that may be on the horizon thanks to The Last of Us, maybe this sort of thing is actually on the cards. But regardless, for me, they really need to reboot the Resident Evil franchise when it comes to the big screen. I just hope their only attempt at doing so wasn't Welcome to Raccoon City. And now that I've brought tears to the eyes of every Resident Evil fan at the mention of Welcome to Raccoon City, I'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching.